We're going to go ahead and get started because we've got about an hour and a half for this meeting. We just want to make sure that we have enough time to be able to answer as many questions as possible and allow us to share all the information as well. So we will go ahead and get started. So good evening, everyone. We will begin now. To start, we wanted to just share this audience engagement instructions. There will be several polls that are going to be launched throughout the presentation. If you register to join and are joining on a mobile device, you're going to see this dialog box that pops up on your screen when we ask those poll questions. When those questions come up, you can just click your answer. It'll be a multiple choice and click submit, and then your answer will be captured. We also ask that you use the Q&A feature to submit any questions at any time throughout the presentations. You can find the button on the toolbar on the bottom of the screen that's labeled Q&A. We have a dedicated time during the presentation where we'll go through those questions. We have wonderful participation tonight for this evening's meeting. So we're going to try to get to as many questions as possible in the allotted time. Also, the meeting is being recorded. We're going to be capturing all the questions and comments that you're sharing tonight. That's going to really help to shape the Transit Master Plan planning process. We're also going to take those frequently asked questions and put them on the project website, which I'll share a little bit more about later in the presentation. But before I begin, I just want to say that your feedback is really important in this process, and will really help to shape what transit looks like now, as well as going into the future. So please don't be shy with asking any questions and sharing feedback tonight, and as well as all the ways that I'm going to be sharing later in the presentation. We really appreciate you joining tonight and being a part of the process. Next slide. So just to start off, we're going to start off with a poll just to get you familiar and comfortable with how to use that polling technology. And what we want to know is, where are you from? So we can go ahead and launch that. I know we did this during the registration process. However, it's great to see, for everyone to be able to see kind of where the participants are from tonight. It looks like everyone is getting their answers in, but just click your answer and press submit. We'll just give you another second or so. Okay, and we can launch the results there. All right, good. We have great representation tonight. Looks like a majority is from McDonough, but we have people from Stockbridge and Hampton, and some from Locust Grove, some from unincorporated Henry County, and some people from outside the county. So that's great. All right, we can stop sharing those results. Next slide. Great, and with that, I'm going to introduce the Henry County Transit Director, Mr. Ty Salters. Ty? Oh, one sec, Ty, I think you have you muted. Hold on one moment.
Good evening. I'm Ty Salters, Transit Director for Henry County Government. I want to thank everyone for taking the time out this evening to participate in this virtual public meeting for Henry County Transit Master Plan. I'm extremely excited about this project and look forward to working with our consultants, my colleagues, our agency partners, and most importantly, our citizens and stakeholders. My goal tonight and for future meetings and outreach events is to educate and inform everyone on what we expect to accomplish by developing this master plan. We also want to answer any questions you may have and solicit public input for the plan. At this time, I would like to turn this back over to Ozzy Kashani, but of course, we'll be available to answer any questions pertaining to the Henry County Transit Department that you may have.
Thank you so much, Ty. So there's a couple other people that I just want to introduce that are on the call and you'll be seeing throughout the presentation. We have Mr. Sam Baker, which is the Transportation Planning Director of Henry County. We have Andrea Spiliotis with the Atlanta Region Link Authority. We have the Prime Consultant and Project Manager who's overseeing the Transit Master Plan planning process, Principal Grady Smith from VHB. We also have from VHB, the Transit and Rail Planning Manager, Laura Everett. From the public engagement consultant, the collaborative firm, we have several people here who are actually helping to facilitate the meeting, including communications and community engagement manager, Gilia Taylor. Also transportation planner, Rachel Staley, and myself, the senior marketing and communications manager at the collaborative firm. Next slide. So now I'm just going to be sharing the meeting agenda to share the structure of the meeting. So we obviously just had the introductions, and then Grady is going to be taking us through what is happening with transit right now in Henry County, as well as sharing what a transit master plan is. And then Laura's going to be taking us through the existing and future conditions, as well as the benefits of public transit. And then I'm going to take you through all the ways that you can get more involved throughout the project outside of just tonight's meeting. And we're going to, then help answer any questions that you may have throughout the Q&A session. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Grady.
Thank you, Ozzy. So I'm going to take a few minutes to just walk you through what's happening now with transit in Henry County. There is a pretty extensive transit system, demand response system here in the county that's been operating for several years. Next slide. So here's some stats and information on the services. It's a demand response service. So what that means is you need to reserve a ride, and you need to try to do that 1 to 7 days in advance. So you schedule that. The service is curb to curb service. So it'll pick you up at your home and take you curb to curb to your destination. It's open to all county residents with no restrictions on age, disability, income, mobility. The cost of the service is $4 a trip. $2 for seniors. And the service is open Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Next slide. The size of the system and the amount of service is pretty impressive. It's for demand response services, is one of the largest in the state. The system provides about 71,000 trips a year. In 2019, it was 70,650 trips, a lot of trips. As you can see here, it's a fleet of 32 vehicles, including a large bus, 29 cutaways, some vans. The office, Ty's office, is located in McDonough. And the service also has an agreement with the state of Georgia, the Department of Human Services, to provide trips for that clientele, their clientele. And that's a major part of the trips that are documented here. Next slide. In addition to the Henry County Transit Services, there's also the ATL Express bus routes. And these routes, the route 430, 431, 432, the 440 and 441 are some of the most utilized routes in the entire region, and as it relates to ATL Express bus services. And as many of you know, there's park and ride lots sprinkled throughout the county. There are 4 of those. Next slide, please. This next slide illustrates some of the utility of these lots, where they're being used. As you can see, Stockbridge and McDonough are some of the highly utilized route park and ride areas. And then also the Hampton and Brandsmart, which is real close to Stockbridge, are pretty well utilized as well. So, pre-pandemic, at some point, you can get to these lots, and it's a struggle to find a parking space. So again, as I mentioned, the ATL Express services are highly utilized up and down that I-75 corridor. Next slide. So at this point, we're gonna do a really quick poll. So Ozzy, let's take them through the poll.
Great. So now we want to know, have you ever used Henry County Transit Services? We'll launch that poll. Answers are coming in. We'll give a few more seconds for everybody to give their response. All right, we can go ahead and share those results. All right, so it looks like a majority of people have not used the Henry County Transit Services, so that will be really helpful to know as we go through this process. We'll have one more question. We can stop sharing those results. Next slide. And now we want to know, have you ever used the express services in Henry County? We'll launch that poll. All right, give you another second or so. All right, we can launch the results. It looks like here as well, it is leaning towards no. There's some people that, there is some people that have used the services, that's great, and some that use it all the time. But a majority is no. So we'll definitely keep that in mind as we go through the process. Thank you so much. Stop sharing those results. Next slide.
So let me talk a little bit about what the Transit Master Plan is. One of the first things I want to say is this planning process is not about bringing MARTA to Henry County. This is really about a Henry County centric vision for what transit services ought to be. That might be building on to what we have today in terms of demand response and express bus services. And it might be other solutions. There are a myriad of solutions that we'll be looking at. And really, we want your input. This process is all about building consensus around a plan that we can all agree on around transit. Next slide. So here are the key elements to this planning process. The first thing, this is a 30-year vision. It's a long-term vision for transit, and you're going to hear a lot more about the existing conditions in the county and the growth and the urbanization that's happening here and how that might relate to more transit services. So we'll be working with you and stakeholders, the elected officials, to develop this 30-year vision plan for transit. It will include both short-term, building on the services that are already operating in the county, to mid and long-term recommendations. We'll be looking at fair policy and financial considerations and opportunities to leverage federal dollars. And then we'll be also taking a look at rebranding the current service in terms of the logo, the look, the feel, the services that are out there now. As we noted, many of you haven't used the transit services, but I'm sure you've seen the vehicles moving people to destinations within the county. Next slide. A big part of our process is working with you to kind of really focus in on a number of goals. One will be around stewardship and partnership and engagement. We want this process to be totally transparent. And as Ozzy and Ty said, we're looking for your input, and we'll continue to do that throughout the process. Vision, we don't want to be short-sighted. We really do want to be visionary and think about new technologies as that is changing rapidly in our community. It's going to impact transportation in a major way. So we really want to be visionary about this planning process, think beyond just what's on the ground today. It's very structured in what we're doing. I mean, we want to make sure that the recommendations that we come up with and solutions fit within a multimodal transportation network. So the structure of this process, we've designed it to make sure that it is a part of a larger system of multimodal transportation improvements. Connectivity within the county, but also connectivity to the region. You'll see later that many of the trips and activities for work and commute in Henry County is people destined for destinations such as the airport, downtown, midtown, Buckhead. We want to make sure that this process connects Henry County to the region. And then finally, we want to take advantage of funding. We all, with the new administration there in Washington, there is a big focus on climate change, transit, being more efficient. We want to make sure that Henry County is in the best position to receive as much federal, state, and local funds as possible to support our vision. Next slide. So why should we do this? Why is there a need for a transit master plan? Well, one of the big drivers for this is the population and employment growth that's happened over the last 30 years here in Henry County. Henry County is one of the fastest growing counties in the state. And with that growth has become it has become more urbanized, and we'll share some stats and information on that later. But what that does is it really limits the amount of monies that we can receive from the Federal Transit Administration. So Henry County right now does receive Federal Transit Administration dollars to provide the services that the county operates now. The way that federal government looks at transit dollar allocation is in two pots. One pot is called a rural pot of money, and then there's a urban pot of money. So as the county initiated its early transit services, the county was receiving a significant amount of rural money to operate the services that I described and that Ty is running today. But as the county urbanizes, the opportunity to leverage those rural dollars become smaller. And so it forces us to look at opportunities to leverage urban dollars. And there are certain principles and certain types of operations you would need to provide to access those dollars. So we want to make sure that we're able to take advantage of as much federal dollars as we can to support moving the folks around the county. There's also unmet demand out there. Pre-COVID, TIE in the system would receive more requests to move for sustenance, to get people to the grocery store, to medical appointments, to get them to those lifeline services than he could support. And so there are unmet demand. There is an unmet demand out there for folks that need to get places that don't have a car or don't have other means. So we want to make sure that everyone has the ability to move and be mobile in the county. And so a big part of the process will be looking at how do we meet those unmet needs. Other pieces is there's a lot of activity around transit in the region. I mentioned earlier the Atlanta Transit Link Authority in their preview looking at connectivity across the region. But there are a number of other counties, very suburban, just like Henry County, that are going through the exact same process. That includes Spalding County, just south of us, Forsyth County, one of the fastest growing counties as well, just north of the core of our region. Rockdale County and Douglas County on the east and west bookends are also looking at transit master plans to get ahead of the growth, to understand how they can efficiently move people around, and to think multimodal and look at connections to the region as a whole. Next slide. So here's our transit master plan process. We're in the process of looking at existing and future conditions, and we're going to share a lot of that information with you tonight. And we really do want to get your input on that. And the next step in the process is we'll take that information and begin to identify those unmet needs I talked about. You know, where are those gaps? Where are how are individuals traveling now? Are there opportunities to close some of those gaps? And we'll be working with you, and we want your input, stakeholders, and a series of committees, a technical committee that involves regional partners such as the Atlanta Regional Link Authority, Georgia Department of Transportation, the Atlanta Regional Commission are all working with us collectively on a technical committee to help shape those needs, both in terms of what's going on within Henry County, but how that relates to the broader Atlanta region. The final step in the process is really to take and understand those needs and to match them up with potential solutions and opportunities. That will include looking at fair policy and developing a sound financial plan for the things that we collectively believe that we want to move forward. That transit master plan document will be housed on a website, and it will go before the Board of County Commissioners for adoption. Next slide. So kind of to wrap it all up, I mean, we really want this plan to be transparent. We want it to be locally supported. We want to hear all sides of the equation so that we all come together in a transparent, concise, and collaborative way in agreement on what we believe transit should or should not be in the next 30 years. We'll identify short, mid, long-term improvement strategies. We'll make sure that we align those investment strategies with funding opportunities so that we're able to leverage our local money to pull down additional state, federal dollars, and in some cases maybe even private investment. There will be focused action plans for Henry County, but also for all the cities to work collectively to achieve the outcome of the plan. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Laura Everett, to speak a little bit about those existing and future conditions. Laura, you want to take it from here?
Sure. Thanks, Grady. As Grady mentioned, we're kind of in the data gathering phase. And so next slide, we're going to be working on gathering a lot of data about existing conditions as well as the future and where we think we're headed. And so these come from a couple of different sources, from the census data. It comes from the Atlanta Regional Commission. It comes from Henry County itself. And so we're going to be looking at some of that data right now. I do want to let you all know that most of the data is going to be pre-COVID data, so it represents a time before the pandemic and hopefully a time we're returning to in the future, but not really right this moment. And I see a number of questions are coming in, so keep sending those questions in. We'll answer those at the end. And so the data we're gathering comes in kind of 4 different categories. There's demographics and land use data, kind of who's here, where they live, where do they work. There's economic development sorts of data. So how are businesses operating, where are the jobs? There's how is Henry County Transit operating, which Grady presented a little while ago. And then just generally transportation needs and planned improvements in the community. So we're going to talk through a few of these things now. Next slide. The first of that is population. And so the bar chart on the left is representing the population growth over a 60-year period. So the darker colors are the estimates of population as it has already been in the past. And then the lighter colors are projecting the population that will be here in the future. And so over a 60-year period, we're looking at 6 multiplications of the population that was here in 1990. So significant population growth occurring. The map on the right kind of shows you where those folks are concentrated, where they're living. So the darker the color means the more folks are living in that particular area. And so you'll see that there are concentrations, higher concentrations, people living in the cities, in the urban areas, city areas, in the northern part of the county and along that I-75 corridor. So not a lot of surprises there. But what does all this population mean for land use? So next slide. In terms of where and how development is occurring, you know, the county is moving kind of from a more rural type of land use environment to a more urban type of land use. And so just looking at the progression of land use changes over time, in 1990, only about 2% of the land uses were considered urban in nature. And so that's that blue-green kind of color on the map. Next slide. And so as we're moving through to just 10 years later, 28% of the county is considered an urban land use. And then going another decade further, next slide, to 2010, over 50% of the county is considered an urban land use. So significant growth in population and kind of changing land uses as well accompany that. Now let's take a moment, next slide, to look at employment. And so again, we're looking at both the darker color indicates on the bar chart the estimates of employment in the past, and then the lighter colors are projections of employment opportunities in the future in Henry County. And so the big takeaway here is that the number of jobs are not increasing at the rate the population growth is occurring. If you recall, in the same 60-year time frame, population would be multiplying 6-fold, and employment isn't even going to double during that time. So significant difference there. In the map on the right, you're going to see where those jobs are located. So again, darker colors mean more jobs in those areas. And so the employment density kind of mirrors where the folks live. It's in the city areas, it's along the I-75 corridor, it's in the northern part of the county. So that kind of gives you an idea of where the jobs are. So continuing with employment, next slide. Let's look at where folks who live in Henry County, so this is data for folks who live in Henry County, and where they actually work, where they're going to work. So Henry County in the map is outlined in red, and the darker colors indicate a higher concentration of jobs in those areas for residents of Henry County. So a number of folks are staying within Henry County. They both live and work in Henry County, but a number of folks are also leaving Henry County to go to work. And this probably doesn't surprise any of you all. They're working at the airport. They're working in downtown and midtown Atlanta, Buckhead, Emory, Sandy Springs. So they're traveling outside the county for work. And so next slide, we can also see just looking at commute patterns in Henry County. The graphic on the right kind of shows the three different types of folks. There are those who both live and work in Henry County. So about 16% of commuters are both live and work within Henry County. So if they, for their transportation purposes, for commute purposes, they only need to get around Henry County. Then you have about 56% of the commute population in Henry County leaving Henry County. They live in Henry County and they're working elsewhere. And I should note the arrows on the screen just indicate that folks are leaving Henry County. It's not indicating exactly any direction of travel. It's just that they are leaving. And then you've got another third, another 29% of the commuters who are coming into Henry County. They live elsewhere, and so they commute into Henry County. And so those folks have different travel needs than the folks who are traveling from Henry to other places for work. So, kind of needing to solve all of those commute needs at one time. So next slide. Now I want to take a shift a little bit to look at just a kind of a segments of the population. There are certain demographic and socioeconomic characteristics of individuals that are tied more closely to transit usage. And so those individuals that have disabilities, individuals that live in households where there are no cars, so zero car households, individuals who are living in poverty, or older Americans or senior citizens, all of those folks tend to use transit at a greater rate than the average population. And so we did some analysis to look at where those individuals live within Henry County. And so again, darker colors mean higher concentrations of these individuals, and they're living in that kind of Stockbridge to McDonough area along I-75. So next slide. And just a last thought about just how folks are traveling today. The Atlanta Regional Commission has a travel demand model where they help us understand how people are traveling. So of all transportation trips in Henry County, about 67% of those are folks driving in their car by themselves. So they are alone in the automobile moving around Henry County. And then about 27% of the trips made in Henry County are a shared ride. There are multiple people in the car. And one interesting fact about this, prior to the managed lanes opening on I-75, that 27% of shared ride, that was a much lower number. It was actually in the single digits. So with the opening of those managed lanes, there are a lot more folks having shared rides. Then in terms of other modes, 5% of trips are made by walking, by pedestrians, 1% by bicycling, and less than 1% by transit. And when we use the travel demand model to look at how that will change in the future, in 2050, there's not much change there, but the model does take into account what sort of investment you're making in transit services. So if you change the amount of investment you make in transit, the model will take that into account and indicate a higher transit usage. So with that, let's go to our next poll, get you all involved. And Ozzy?
Yes, so we would like to know, where do you commute? We can go ahead and launch that. The answers are coming in. All right, I'll give you another second or two to finish that out. All right, we can go ahead and launch. All right, so it looks like a lot of people within Henry County, a little bit to the airport, some that are going to the downtown and midtown Atlanta area. The majority is actually to other, and then some people are not commuting to work, and that kind of goes along with what Laura had just shared, showing that a lot of people are actually going outside of the county rather than staying on the inside. I'm going to go ahead and stop those polls. Next slide. Got another slide here for you. So how did you commute to work before COVID? We can go ahead and launch that poll. Give about another 10 seconds. Looks like there's a few more coming in. All right, we can go ahead and launch that. So yeah, so as the data suggested and as Grady has presented and Laura, this is what we're seeing is that most people in Henry County are commuting by driving alone. So that's definitely in line with kind of what we have seen so far. All right, we can stop that poll. Next slide. And Laura, I'll pass it back to you to go through the benefits of public transit.
Awesome, thank you, Ozzy. So yeah, now we're going to shift a little bit and talk about the benefits of public transit. And we wanted to do this because we know a number of you don't use transit. And so if you don't use it, you may not know all of the different benefits that it can have for a community. Next slide. And aside from just getting you where you need to go, there are a lot of other benefits. For example, for every dollar that a community spends on public transportation, it generates $4 in economic return. So it cycles through the economy and gives you 4 times the bang for your buck, if you will. It also has a lot of environmental impacts. There's a lot of reduced amounts of emissions if folks get on into a bus instead of driving individually. It also has a lot of congestion. It assists with congestion. If you look at the image on the right, you see that those are the same number of people in each of those images, but it shows how much roadway those same people take up if they're riding a bus versus if they're all driving in their car alone. And so you can see how the bus would help with congestion and freeing up some roadway space for other vehicles. One key point here to make also is that there isn't a link between public transportation and crime. That's not something we see in the data. And finally, taking the bus is a lot safer and less stressful than driving in an automobile. You're less likely to be in a car crash if you are in a bus. So that's another benefit of public transit. And next slide, with that, I will turn it over to Ozzy to tell you how you all can get more. Oh, nope, we got another poll, sorry. Oh, Ozzy, you're on mute. Ozzy, you're on mute.
Sorry about that, guys. Thank you, Laura, for sharing that. So now we just want to know what would motivate you to use transit. So if we can launch that poll. We've got some options here. And this one's a little bit longer, so you may have to scroll down a little bit to see all the answers. We have a few more seconds. We got some more coming in. All right, we can go ahead and launch that. So it looks like the winner here is that it's less stressful than driving, which, yes, I agree with that. Some of the other answers: saves me money, saves me time, helps the environment. That's a big one, and other. So, during the Q&A session, if there's, some questions that you have about that, we can definitely answer that. We can go ahead and end that. Next slide. All right, so now I'm going to take you through all the ways that you can get more involved with this Henry County Transit Master Plan. Next slide. So there'll be all sorts of public involvement activities, including several virtual public meetings. This, of course, is the first one. The next one is slated for the springtime, and then there's going to be a couple closer to summer and in the summer. The public meetings will be virtual for now, and we'll stay flexible based on the trajectory of COVID. So you may see in-person meetings as well in the future, and we're going to be keeping that in mind. However, the meetings will be scattered from now through the end of the planning process, which is in September 2021. And each meeting will help share information based on each milestone for feedback at that time. There's going to be several ways that you can hear about the public meetings. Of course, if you signed up with your email on the website or registered for this event, you will get the future invitations through email social blasts. We also do share the information throughout the social media, so look for it there, and hopefully you'll connect with us on those channels on Henry County. And I encourage you to sign up on the website if you haven't already for email blasts that for information that's going to be coming through. There's also some other tools that you can help share your feedback as well outside of these public meetings. There's an online survey that is live right now on the project website, which I'll tell you about a little bit more in detail shortly. There's of course these polls that are part of this, the presentations that you're familiar with now, hopefully during this meeting. We also have the project website that houses all the important information about the project. Next slide. So the project website link is listed here, henrytransitmasterplan.com. Hopefully you'll remember to visit that. On the website, you will find information about the project, and it's going to be updated regularly with project milestones. There's going to be information about upcoming meetings, as well as other project-related information, including a fact sheet that has just all the meat of the Transit Master Plan process on one, a sheet or two. Different information that comes along through the project will be housed there. And if you go on the website, on the top right of the website, you're going to see a submit feedback tab. And there you will find information about the public meetings. The survey that I mentioned earlier is housed there as well. And that survey is a deeper dive of the different questions to get your feedback about transit, your use of it, your thoughts of it, what areas are important, and just general comments and feedback. So we really encourage you to, please take that survey, as it's really going to help to capture your input and feedback in a much deeper way, and will be used throughout the planning process. There's also an interactive mapping tool that lives on the website where you can actually share more specific information about the different transit areas. And as you exit the meeting tonight, you will be redirected to that URL. We encourage you to please take a few minutes to take that survey and use the mapping tool to share more detailed information and feedback. Because as I've mentioned, as well as Laura and Grady and Ty have shared, your input is just really important for this plan. So we would love to hear from you all, even outside the limitations of time in this meeting, as well as throughout the development of the project. Next slide. All right, so now we're going to launch another poll. We have such great participation tonight and great representation from the various communities, as we saw earlier. And we just want to understand how you heard about this meeting. It will help us with our efforts in the future and making sure to focus on those areas. So we can go ahead and launch that poll. Give it another second or two. All right, we can go ahead and launch that. All right, so it looks like the winner is through email, so that's great. And if you haven't already signed up, please, go to the website, sign up to be, on the future email list. A lot of people did see it on Facebook. That's great. We'll be continuing to share information there. Some saw it on a flyer in the news and newspaper, and a friend and coworker told you about it. So that's great. And some said other. That's good to know. We'll make sure to keep that in mind as we do outreach in the future. We can go ahead and stop sharing that. Next slide. All right, so then here on this slide, I just wanted to share that the Transit Master Plan will truly be successful by obviously getting input and feedback from the community. And the more feedback that we can get from all areas of the community will really help to shape the plan based on the community needs and desires. As Grady had shared earlier, this is a 30-year vision for transit. And with that, it's really super important for everyone to be involved. Now, of course, we have the outreach in all the ways that I shared earlier, but we would love your help as well to help get the word out in your own communities. I did see, in the last poll that, a lot of you guys did hear from friends and family. So if you guys can continue that and share with your neighbors, with your coworkers, family and friends, as they may have, a need and say as well about the plan. So, obviously the county is growing very quickly, as was shared throughout the presentation, and your community's needs may change along with that growth. So we hope that you continue to participate in future meetings and, use all the tools that have been discussed. And we ask that you share the meetings and events and invitations, email it out to your companies, your friends, your family, have them join the email list, share the website with them so they can learn about the project and, give their feedback. We'd love for you guys to share the survey and the mapping tool that's on the project website. We just really want to hear from everyone and make sure everyone's voice is captured. That will really help to shape that transit master plan. Next slide. All right, with that, I will pass it back to Grady to share some of the upcoming milestones for this project.
Thanks, Ozzy. We've shared a lot of information, and we are just at the beginning of the process, as I mentioned earlier. So we'll be completing the data gathering process here towards the end of March. We're, as Ozzy said, again, you're going to hear this again and again. Your input is very important to that. And so all of the information that we've shared tonight, if you have any questions, and we'll get some of that, but if beyond tonight, if you need any additional information on that data, we want to make sure we got that right. So that's where we are now, and we're hoping to finish up the data collection in March. The alternatives or the solutions and opportunities work will kick off in the April to June timeframe. As I mentioned, we'll have public meetings. We'll be providing additional information on the website, social media. We'll be getting the word out, and we really do truly need your help in doing that. The financial analysis is the summertime, and that's when, again, we'll be looking at fair policy. We'll be looking at, hopefully we'll have a better sense of, building back America initiatives in DC and what that might mean in terms of financial opportunities for the county to take advantage of. But the financial analysis kicks off in the summertime. We'll be beginning to prioritize and look at the rebranding. Again, with your input, each of these steps will have public input as a part of them. That's summer as well. That's, again, when we're going to look at trade-offs, look at those tough decisions about what we all agree upon as potential solutions, the right solution set. And as I mentioned, we'll have a piece of rebranding as we look at that, and working with the Henry County team on making the Henry County transit system branding update. And then the final transit master plan is anticipated in the fall. That, again, will be a comprehensive document. It will reflect all of the feedback we've gathered over the course of these milestones. It will be presented to the Board of County Commissioners for consideration and hopefully adoption. And then it's all about making the plan a reality. And as we've talked about, this is the long look. It's a 30-year plan, but we want to put in the right blocks to achieve that what we vision over those 30 years. So again, we've gone through a lot of information. We've been speaking to you for about 45 minutes, and a lot to absorb. And so let's take a breather here and transition into our question and answer phase. I'm sure, Agilia, we have a lot of questions. And so at this point, let's take a breather and go through the questions, and we'll try to answer them.
Grady, we do have a lot of questions, and I am excited about the interest. I will say that we may not get to everybody's question, but we will get to as many as possible. And where there are similarities, I may group some of them together based on the issue. Our first question is, pardon me, 1 second here. Are there future plans to expand the hours for operation for current transit into the later evening or weekend hours?
I'll take that one, Gilia. And yes, we will be looking at the temporal nature, the timing nature of the schedule of the service that's on the street today. We are aware that, making connections with, for example, the ATL Express services, that some of those routes arrive a little after 6. And so in some cases that you can't make the connection to Henry County Transit if you wanted to. So yes, looking at the schedule of the current services and the potential connectivity to the existing ATL Express services is something that we're going to take a close look at.
Thank you. What type of transit are you considering for Henry County?
I'll take that one as well, Julia. We're not limiting the spectrum or universe of transit options. We're not saying that it's bus or it's trains. It's the full spectrum of transit opportunities. As I mentioned in the presentation, technology is becoming a big part of the transportation arena, and so we want to make sure we take a look at mobility on demand solutions as well as potential opportunities to move people around. So we're going to be spending time as we move into the next phase, the needs assessment and development of alternatives, to bring forth the universe of all of those various options. And then as a team collectively with the community, the stakeholders, we will pick and choose the ones that are best appropriate for Henry County. And so that will include education, but also a process to get your input on what modes, what types of transit, bus, train, mobility on demand, smaller circulator systems, whatever those ideas are. We want to look at all of those and screen down to the ones that are most appropriate for the county. We'll be doing that again in a very transparent way with your help.
Wonderful. Thank you, Grady. We had several questions that dealt with the special needs community and access for disabled persons. Some of the things that they asked about were that the biggest problem is connectivity to other counties and needing better transition between counties. Like, I'm sorry, there's an example that says it would be helpful to have a tie-in with the MARTA bus or rail system. Are there plans for accommodation for the blind or visually impaired? Also, and this is all still related to special needs and disability communities, will the area near 138, 155 be included in public transit? As a 30-year resident of unincorporated Stockbridge, I need access to these things. I gave you a lot to work with.
Yeah, no, this is a very good question, and I'm gonna ask Laura Everett to kind of help. I'll fill this one and start by saying yes. We're looking at the full spectrum of socioeconomic and demographics of the county and the needs of everyone. So folks with disabilities is a big part of that. So Laura, you want to talk a little bit about how we do that and how that will be reflected in the alternatives we look at?
Sure. So if you recall, at one point in the slides, we talked about our transit reliant population. And so we are looking at individuals and understanding where folks who have disabilities, who are limited income, who are older and may prefer or not be able to drive. And so we're looking at where those folks live so that we can think about services to provide to them. So this plan will take that into account. It will take into account all of Henry County geography. And then it's really helpful to hear about where there are, I'm going to call it sticking points in your travel. So you mentioned traveling to another county as being tricky. So that's very helpful to us to understand that. And I would also encourage you to use the tool Ozzy mentioned to show us more of those kind of areas where you want service on the website. So putting kind of points on a map of where you think services should be is very helpful to us as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Laura and Grady. Next question. Is the land and right-of-ways being secured now before it increases in cost?
That's a very, very good question. And at this point, we're in the planning process. And so the typical project development process starts with planning, and then you move into your environmental and your right-of-way acquisition phase, and then eventually into your design and then construction phases. So we're at the really early stages of the planning process. So we have not acquired any property. We have not identified exactly where the transit investments need to be. So we're at the beginning of the process, and we're looking for your input to identify where those transit solutions need to be located in the county, how those connections to the region would work, where should it be a tie-in to the airport, how should we tie into MARTA or even to the ATL Express services. So we're in the early stage, and the simple answer to the question is no, we have not gotten into the next stage when we're acquiring right away to build projects. We're not there yet.
Got it. Thank you. How does this plan, the current plan, I'm sorry, let me be more specific about reading this question. Give me 1 second here. Sometimes my paraphrasing efforts get really special. How does this plan, the current plan, connect with, I guess, a previous plan? I'm not certain about how this is written. Another part of this question is, are there any completed projects from the first plan?
That's a very, very good question. And I've had the opportunity to work on the previous plan. of which was the transit part of it was included in a comprehensive transportation plan for the county. And so in that planning process, a few years ago, Ty and others on the Henry County staff worked on this plan with us. We identified a number of potential transit solutions, one of which included the implementation of the county's first fixed bus route. That service was implemented just prior to COVID and was operated as a pilot to test that service and the utility of it. And then, of course, we had the pandemic issue. And so the county has decided to kind of pull back on that. So yes, there have been a number of other projects implemented as well out of that planning process that were mainly on the roadway side, the bike ped side. But for transit, we continue to improve the transit services that Ty and his team has been providing. The number of trips have steadily increased. I mentioned there were over 70,000 trips being provided on an annual basis. That's been a pretty steep growth curve. So there's a lot has changed, and we anticipate, Laura showed you earlier, sort of that transition from 90 to 2000 to 2010. And we anticipate when the 2020 census information comes out, we're going to be more than 50% urbanized in the county. And so we would expect to see more opportunity for transit to have a role in meeting unmet needs.
Thank you. And Grady, you actually answered a question unknowingly. Someone mentioned fixed routes needing to be addressed as an option. So thank you. The next question is, as a long-term resident who is concerned about dilapidated roads and traffic congestion, how will this plan deal with all the proposed development in the county? And more importantly, when will our roads throughout the county be repaired of potholes? In the future, will the county stop building roundabouts and put traffic lights in crucial areas such as Highway 20? So you got a couple of questions in there.
Yeah, I'll take the first part of that, and I'll hand it over to Sam to take the second half. The tie to development is a big part of what makes transit work, and so density and intensity of land use is important when we're talking about the transit component of transportation and investments in the county. And so we'll be looking at that data that Laura showed and new data related to where development is happening, the intensity and density of that development, and looking at what types of transit options would align with that density and intensity. And so the second half of the question, let me turn that over to Sam to talk about the roundabouts and the maintenance issues on the roadway side. Sam?
Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Baker. I'm the Director of Transportation Planning with Henry County. I manage Henry County's transportation planning program. What I heard, I think the gist of the question is really, should we invest in our public transportation or not? Or should we focus on road improvements and road widenings instead? I think we need to do both. Yes, we need to make improvements to a number of our roads, as well as widen some of our roads to address our traffic congestion situation. And Henry County has a comprehensive transportation plan that we developed a couple of years ago. And it lists a long list of road projects that we need to undertake to improve the road condition, as well as accommodate additional traffic. And the news that I have for you is that if we want to implement all the road projects that are in our transportation plan, the price tag of all those road projects, including all the roundabouts that you mentioned, is $3.3 billion, billion with a B, over the next 20 years. And the plan concludes that we do not, and we are not going to have $3.3 billion over the next 20 years. In fact, we are short by $2.2 billion. So that's the situation we are in, that this road-focused approach to traffic congestion management is simply not financially feasible. We now have a population of 245,000, And our projection shows that the Henry County's population will rise to 369,000 in year 2050 over the next 30 years. So from 245 going to 369. And if you stand on a Henry County, any road, and just look, the cars pass by, you will see that in the majority of the cars, there's only one passenger, and it's the driver. And one person driving one car everywhere. And that is the perfect recipe for traffic congestion. And so to tackle our traffic congestion, we got to think of other ways. So what am I talking about? Number one, we need to drive less. If you have an employer who offers you to work from home or telework, take advantage of it and thus drive less. If you are an employer, consider allowing your employees to work from home or telework at least 1 day a week. It cuts down the number of car trips. In my case, it cuts down 4 car trips every day. 1 from home to work, 1 from office to Chick-fil-A at lunchtime, then Chick-fil-A back to office, and then from office back home. 4 car trips eliminated. Multiply that by the population. It can cut down a lot of trips. Number 2, share car trips. If you can ride with somebody instead of driving alone, it cuts down the number of cars on the road. I have colleagues who during lunchtime get together in one car and go to lunch instead of driving individually. And number 3, I think we need to embrace public transit. It gives people another mode to choose from, and thus reduces reliance on personal automobiles. It's also good for the environment. A bus emits less exhaust than 20 cars combined. So it takes some cars off the road if people ride bus. To answer your question, I guess, yes, we need to do road improvements and widen some of the roads, but it cannot be the only thing. We also need to consider public transportation and reduce our reliance on cars.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. The next question asks, will the county use biometrics to increase security while using the transit system? Because there are other questions related to security in general on the transit system. Will someone address that overall?
Yeah, safety and security is something that we have to address if we're hoping to maximize our opportunity to pull down federal transit dollars. There are pretty strict regulations on the safety and security aspect of developing a transit system. So we haven't gotten to that point yet, but there will be a safety and security element to this plan that addresses all of the issues that could come about around safety and security. And that's just the first step. When we begin to implement the specific projects, there will be different safety and security elements to those projects. And again, if we're hoping to utilize federal dollars, we will be required to do that. So that will include a full spectrum of elements, and we'll get into that when we're looking at specific project types.
Got it. Thank you. Next question. How will the TMP incorporate eco-friendly strategies?
And I'll take this one too, and Laura, lead. I would love for you to chime in a little bit, but one of the things that we're going to do as we're looking at fleets and different technologies is look at the eco-friendly part of that. And so things like electric vehicles will be considered. And there's a cost differentiation when we're looking at an electric vehicle versus a fossil fuel vehicle. There's new technologies around diesel, clean diesel technology that's out there. So when we're evaluating and scoring and looking at the various modes, a big part of that is going to be looking at what we get in terms of the environmental considerations. So if it's an electric vehicle, of course, the emissions aren't direct there at the vehicle, but let's not forget that we have a power plant not too far away. There is emissions associated there, but there's trade-offs on all of that. We're going to be looking at that and seeking your feedback and your choice on what's important and reflect that in our decision making on which types of vehicles and technologies make the most sense for Henry County.
Really, let me add something to that. I have been in a conversation with Georgia Power recently, and Georgia Power offers some programs to local governments where they offer financial incentives to switch from gasoline and diesel run vehicles to electric vehicles. So I'm at the information gathering stage. We'll then discuss with our county management and elected officials to see if this is something we want to take advantage of and convert some of our vehicles to electric vehicles, which in the long run saves money. Electric vehicles have a lot less maintenance issues and are more economical in the long run. While there's an upfront cost, but in the long run, it saves money. So I'm in talks with Georgia Power, and this is something we are looking into.
Good point, Sam. And I think to the other federal side of it is, I said earlier about, the Build America Back initiative at the federal level. What we're hearing is climate is a big part of that. And so there's a big initiative coming out of DC, very similar to the Georgia Power Incentive Program. There will likely be federal incentives for fleets that are electric. So we'll be looking at that as well.
I think the one big thing to remember is no matter the fuel that's used with the vehicle, transit is a more eco-friendly option than driving your car alone. The network of transit agencies across the United States save 37 million metric tons of carbon dioxide every year that are not pumped out because people aren't driving their cars. That goes for NOx, all sorts of different emissions. And those emissions also affect, the air that you breathe. And so asthma rates are really heightened by all of that emission. So keeping those emissions low also help with our health concerns in the long run. So there's a lot of benefits just no matter what type of fuel you're using in the vehicle, just from transit alone.
Good point, Laura.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic answers. Thank you. Another question asks, are new sidewalks and bike lanes included in the current Henry County budget, or do they have to be included in future transit plans?
Let me take that again. We have a robust transportation planning agenda for this year. So we plan to address bike lanes and other modes besides transit. So this year we are going to, besides the transit plan, we are going to update Henry County's comprehensive transportation plan, which will look at roads, bridges, sidewalks, bike lanes, freight. And then we are also going to develop a Henry County Trails Master Plan, which will focus on developing a trails network for Henry County. So with the transit plan, the trails plan, and the transportation plan, we are going to address all aspects of transportation in Henry County.
Fantastic, thank you. Next question. Has the county considered a shuttle service to transport workers from park and rides to the warehouse areas at regularly scheduled intervals, such as every 30 minutes?
Ty, you want to take that one?
At this current moment, we haven't had the request to transport workers from a commuting vehicle to the warehouses, but that is something that we are open to. And I think with this transit master plan, if that request comes in during the need phases and existing condition phases, we will consider that as well.
Thank you.
I think what we want to get across tonight is that we are at a stage we want to hear from you what you want as far as transit service. And then from that, we will then develop our plan recommendations. So if you tell us that we need transit service from park and ride lots to warehouses, then we will take this into consideration in our plan recommendation.
Thank you. Next question, coupled with a statement. You showed the land usage map. How does that map look at the end of the 30-year time frame?
Laura, you want to take that one?
Sure. I don't know that we have projections of exactly how the development looks in the future. We have population and employment and those sorts of projections, but I'm not sure we have the actual land use sort of projections.
There is a future land use map that the county has adopted that shows future land use, and we can provide that information to you. It will be included in our existing conditions analysis report that will be posted on the website.
I think that in brief, what the future land use map shows is that the Atlanta is growing and is growing outward. So more and more of Henry County is going to become urbanized. I shared with you a little earlier that the population projection shows that people in Henry County will increase from 245,000 to 369,000 people. So just imagine 369 people living in Henry County. So it's going to be more crowded and more urbanized. And that is the trend. So with the population growth and employment growth, there's also looking at increased traffic congestion as a result.
Thank you. Next question. Will the plan involve Express creating reverse commute routes for people traveling into the county?
That's a very good question, Julia. And yes, we will be considering both reverse commute and commute out of the county. I know that the ATL service currently now, if you could make a reverse trip if you needed to, but we'll be taking a more detailed look at that and how to make that more viable. We'll be working with the ATL service. Andrew is actually on the line. Andrew, would you like to make a few comments about the ATL service and the opportunities for reverse commute?
Sure. I believe it was an option at one point. I don't believe it's still part of the current commuter bus service to do the reverse commute. But we will flag that for confirmation and discussion. I'll follow up with operations on that. And if the person would like to submit that through the website, so we have their contact information, I can follow up with them. If they go to that henrytransitmasterplan.com website and submit that. But yeah, just to echo what's already been said a little bit, we'll just be looking as far as commuter bus service goes at where some of these residential densities are, where the employment densities are in the region, and going from there to figure out what the top priorities for Henry County would be. If Express had the resources to expand service, what would those top priorities be?
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Another question asks, I live in unincorporated Henry County. How does this plan affect me?
I'll take that one, Gilly. I mean, it does impact you. It impacts all of Henry County. So unincorporated is a part of the mix, just as the cities are. So we're looking for input from everybody. This process impacts you in that we want your input. We want to know what's important to your travel needs and your mobility concerns, and how transit can play a role in solving those needs. So everybody's in. It's the entire county that we're working to achieve a transit master plan for.
Thank you. This may have been touched on, but specifically, will there be transit solutions to get people to the airport?
Yes, as Andrew kind of hit too, I mean, we're looking at connectivity to all of the major employment centers that are important to Henry County commutes, as well as reverse commutes, as we just talked about. So if a connection to the airport is something that is extremely important for the county, we'll be looking out at opportunities to do that. As we showed and demonstrated in some of the data, the airport is a pretty significant destination for many of the county residents as an employment center. So yeah, we'll be looking at that, as well as connections to Midtown, downtown, connections to the existing MARTA rail line, in a different ways, connections to the MARTA bus services, and also connections to Spalding County. They're looking at transit. So if there's a way for us to tie into their transit service, we want to look at that too.
Fantastic, thank you. Next question. How or by what metrics are your job estimates coming from?
Laura, you want to take that?
Sure. So we have a number of different data sources, but in terms of the estimates of what's out there today, that's coming from both Census and Department of Labor estimates. If you're talking about kind of the future projections, then those are coming from the Atlanta Regional Commission. They have a whole process for projecting employment, population for the whole Atlanta region. So we didn't create those projections or estimates. We took them from other sources.
Thank you.
Celia, before you go to the next question, I just want to give a time check to everyone. We've got about, I would say about 7 more minutes for question and Q&A. So just wanted to make sure that everybody uses that Q&A button to answer any questions, and we'll of course get to as many as possible before in the time allotted. But just wanted to give a time check. Thank you.
Thank you, Ozzy. I appreciate that. So we will get through as many of these as we can. Someone mentioned that they did not see Uber on the list as an option and wanted to know if those types of options are being considered.
So I think, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Laura. I mentioned microtransit mobility on demand. Essentially, that's what Uber service is. So yes, it is on the list. And as I said, the universe is on the list. We're not limiting the list to any given mode. We want to make sure that we include all transit modes and technologies as we look at solutions, the solution set for Henry County. So it's on the list with a lot of other options as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for clearing that up, Grady. Next question. Some of your material mentioned items like electric trolleys and pods. Are energy efficient transportation methods like those really realistic options?
I'll take that one. And, you know, if you want to jump in on that one too, Laura, I mean, what we're experiencing in the transportation industry is just tremendous. I mean, the influx of technology and how it's being deployed in transportation is changing day by day. Every day there's a new advancement in technology. As we look out 30 years, we believe, yes, that we will likely see autonomous and connected vehicles as potential solutions. Yes, we believe that there will be opportunities for increased mobility on demand types of solutions. Who could envision Uber and Lyft just 10 years ago? So the changes in technology are going to happen. We're going to do our best to future-proof and look at that in a sensible way and bring forth the things that we think are most appropriate and more likely to occur. You mentioned pods and the futuristic parts of personal rapid transit. We're starting to see those technologies take off in other parts of the world. Personal rapid transit, for example, is a system that does exist today in London Heathrow Airport. I actually had a chance to ride that service where there are autonomous pods that take you directly to your destination. Dubai is deployed a very similar system. So in the short, we're going to do our best to future-proof and bring forth ideas that doesn't limit us, that allows us to change as technology changes over time.
That is exciting to hear, Grady. I wasn't aware of a lot of those things, so I'm sure some people in the audience are excited about it as well. Thank you. Talk a little bit about the relationship between planning and funding for implementation.
I can take this one as well, or if Laura, you want to take a shot at it, I'll start and then you can kind of jump in. So our planning process here will identify, first of all, sort of a set of solutions that are designed to meet the unmet needs of the county. Sam talked about earlier, for example, if we were to build our way with roads out of our congestion problems, it would cost the county over $3 billion to do that. That's an unconstrained view of what needs to happen if we want to build roads as a potential solution. And even with the $3 billion in investment with roads, I suspect as fast as the county is growing, we will still continue to have congestion issues. So the first part of our process is unconstrained, and we're going to put cost aside, and we're going to look at all the needs around the county. We're going to line those up with potential solutions and opportunities. The second phase of the process is really about being able to make some tough choices to prioritize the things that we can actually afford. And so we'll set aside that list of everything next to a list of what we think we can actually accomplish in terms of financing. That includes potential federal sources. And we're very optimistic that the Federal Transit Administration opportunities for dollars will increase under this new administration. The current situation in Washington over the past 10, 15 years, longer than that, 20 years, has been 50 cents on the dollar for transit investments. So for every 50 cents that a local would put in, the federal government would match that 50. We're hearing rumors that that could change to an 80-20 situation like it was when MARTA was built. For every 20 cents back in the day that the local governments in DeKalb, Fulton, and the city of Atlanta put in for MARTA, they got 80% on the dollar. So we're hearing that that might come back. So we'll be looking at financial, and we'll look at that unconstrained list, and we'll begin to prioritize that list down to what we can actually afford. And that's called constraining the plan to make it a more realistic plan based on what the revenues may be. So that's essentially how we're going to tie the planning process together with the financial process.
And just to add to that in a more kind of simplistic way, the connection between planning and funding is, so the federal government isn't going to provide funding for something we haven't planned for. So it has to be in a plan for the federal government to say, yes, go forward, here's some money to do what you want to do. So it's really important for us to have these sorts of plans so that we have something to point back to when the federal government says, here's a pot of money you can apply for. So that's more of the kind of just direct linkage between those two activities.
Thank you, Laura. So I think, Ozzy, are we can we take a few more questions, or where are we on time?
Sorry, we have time for
sorry.
one more question.
The last question is a simple one, and Ozzy, you may be able to respond to this. Will a recording of this meeting be made available online?
Yes, so this is actually being live streamed right now on the county channels, and there it is on the website as well as on the Facebook channel. So it should be there in the next couple of days for you to be able to see a recording.
One last statement. I apologize, I intended to loop it into this, but it's a good point. Once these meetings begin to go in person in the future, will you consider keeping an online version available, a virtual meeting?
Yes, we can actually, with all the technology that is out there now, we can certainly have it recorded and presented online as well, and find a way to have questions filtered from the audience.
Fantastic. That's all we have for tonight. That's all we have time to get to. Thank you all.
Hey, thank you guys so much. So thank you to all our panelists for helping to discuss all the topics asked about. We got so much great questions asked and answered tonight. We've captured a lot of great feedback, and we hope that you will continue to share feedback in the various tools I shared earlier, as well as participate in future meetings, as well as various milestones of the project. One note before I pass it on for closing remarks is that when you leave the meeting, you're going to be redirected to the project website, where you will find the survey and the project mapping tool that myself and Laura had kind of talked about. And we hope that you can take a few minutes to share your feedback there as well in a deeper way. There's also our project email address. So if any questions didn't get answered tonight, you can surely ask it there, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And with that, I will pass it to Mr. Sam Baker for closing remarks.
I want to take this an opportunity to thank all the Henry County citizens who took the time out of your busy life to join us this evening. Besides this transit master plan development, we are also going to undertake 2 additional transportation plans. I mentioned those earlier. We are going to update Henry County's comprehensive transportation plan. This transportation plan will focus on roads, bridges, sidewalks, bike lanes, freight, areas other than transit. And then the third one is that we are also going to develop a Henry County Trails Master Plan. This Trails Master Plan is going to come up with a connected trails network for Henry County that allows you to go from one end of Henry County to another by trails, trails where you can walk and bike. And then we're going to come up with a catchy name and a logo for Henry County's Trails Network that will identify the trails as Henry County's trails. So it's very exciting. It's an exciting year for transportation planning in Henry County. We have a very busy agenda. So you will be hearing about those as well, transportation plan and the trails plan. Besides this transit plan that we are working on. The other thing that I want to share with all of you is that Henry County created a citizen run group to give feedback on all our transportation planning projects and processes. And this is called a Transportation Advisory Group. So this is a group of 10 citizens picked from the county as well as the 4 municipalities. So right now we have 6 members already appointed to this citizen group appointed by the Henry County Commission Chair and our 5 commissioners. So as of today, we still have 4 vacancies left from the 4 municipalities of Stockbridge, McDonough, Hampton, and Locust Grove. So if you live in one of those 4 cities and you want to contribute to transportation planning in Henry County, give citizens input and feedback, I would encourage you to get in touch with your elected official and thus get involved more personally in Henry County's transportation, transit planning and trails planning process. So we want your involvement and your input and feedback. So consider joining the Transportation Advisory Group. Last but not the least, if you want to keep up with what's going on in transportation planning in Henry County, I suggest that you visit Henry County Department of Transportation Planning's website. So you go to the Henry County's website at www.co.henry.ga.us. So on the homepage, on the top right corner, you click the departments button, and from that drop-down list, select transportation planning. And that will take you to the transportation planning website. And there you can keep up with what's going on in Henry County with road planning, transit planning, trails planning, and everything. So that way you are more aware and know about what's going on in the county. We want you to be involved, and we want you to give us your input and feedback. And with that, I want to conclude tonight's meeting, and thank you again for joining us this evening.
Yes. Thank you, Sam. And thank you again to everyone who joined tonight for your participation this evening. We hope that you have a wonderful evening. Good night.